thank you for joining me for this presentation. Just a little background, this was part of my doctoral project. The aim of this particular paper is to explore how the experience of social change mediates educators' constructions of society and social diversity, and to examine how educators forge the boundaries of national collectivity within this context of change. The study draws on social constructionism as a theoretical framework, because I argue that teachers' practices cannot be separated from the divisions they have of society and their positions towards it. So their constructions cannot be taken out of the context in which they have been socialized. I applied critical qualitative methodology and conducted 19 in-depth interviews with educators from church, state, and independent schools. Critical discourse analysis was used to analyze the data. So, the context, I think Christine has explained the context
yes.
before me very well. And adding to that, I have to add also some other social changes, like the introduction of divorce, which was a very big issue on the island, with those in favor and those against, as well as the LGBTI community, through legislation, they were given more rights, such as the possibility to marry and the possibility to adopt children. So there were changes in many different layers of Maltese society. Obviously, these changes are then reflected in our schools. So in our schools, we have, from the 1990s, we've had students with disabilities who had a right to attend a mainstream school due to migration, and also due to Maltese choosing other religion than Catholicism and other faith. There was an increase of non-Catholic students, more migrant students. Adding to that, so you have these social changes, and then there are the reforms which were happening in school, the college system, and then teachers had to contend with the removal of streaming and its reintroduction as bending and setting, co-education, learning outcome streaming, and it is a very overwhelming situation for teachers in our schools, considering also the little training they have actually had. So, this paper was written because teachers answered this question. If you could paint a picture of Maltese society, how would you paint it? And the findings show that educators think that Maltese society is a very divided society on many issues, but particularly on due to party politics. So we have a tradition of being very tribal in our politics. Party allegiance has thus resulted in extreme polarization, which was illustrated by one of the participants in my study, who I will call Claudine, who, when I asked her about this picture, she said that it wouldn't be difficult to create, because she'd draw a line in the middle of a page and color half of it blue and half of it red, representing the two main political parties. She also said that due to our proximity, it's very difficult for the Maltese to go against the beliefs of their families regarding party politics. So if you're coming from a staunch Labourite or nationalist family, it's very difficult to break ranks with them and support another party or no party at all. And for instance, no one believes that you sit on a fence, that you don't support either parties. So educators claim that many Maltese accept ideas and claims by their political leaders passively, without any critical thinking whatsoever. So whatever their leader says or their party says, it's taken as being the truth. And this gives consent to the party leaders and power to control people's thinking and actions. So, and this is a division which benefits the political class only and not the common citizen. What is interesting is that while many of the participants acknowledged this division, they did not challenge it, not even during the interviews. I mean, I'm talking about a good number of participants, but not all, obviously. And often contributed to its perpetuation. For instance, if during the interview they criticized, I don't know, a policy which was put forth by the Nationalist Party in government, immediately after they would criticize a policy brought forth by the Labour Party, as if to balance the discussion. One teacher, in fact, said that this is all due to us not having an education in which we are taught how to think. Mainly, that we do not learn our history. For those who are not Maltese, history is very marginal in our curriculum. And if you want to learn history, you have to take it as an option. So we are having generation after generation who don't know anything about our history. Besides, talking about our contemporary politics and politicians is basically a taboo in most schools. So this contributes to the continuation of these party politics as they are now. During the interviews, educators focused heavily on social change, considering it either a threat to their values and norms or as a breath of fresh air that breaks away from imposition and tradition. This was captured well by one participant who depicted Maltese society as a two-faced Janus. One face looking firmly at the past, wishing it remained in the past, and the other face looking at the future and wishing that things and looking forward to the changes in society. And then she said there are those who are in the middle, who are still trying to make sense of all these changes, which are challenging their outlook. And perhaps the Catholic religion, its rituals and practices, ingrained as they are in the constructions of Maltese society, was bound to feature heavily. As it is very difficult to operate outside this cultural Catholicism, if you're analyzing Maltese society. Being Maltese automatically translates to one as being Catholic, even if you're Muslim, even if you're an atheist, unless there is an outward manifestation of your faith, like wearing the hijab, for example, you are considered as being Catholic. It's taken for granted. And one particular participant said, very interestingly, that we use this religion to distinguish the us, the insiders, from them, the outsiders. And the outsiders are generally, in Malta, Muslims. Some participants argued that the Catholic identity constitutes a more deserving status and regarded non-Catholics, again, particularly Muslims, as marginal to the collective Maltese identity. In fact, even in schools, Muslim students are very often considered as immigrants, even if they are Maltese citizens and have Maltese parents or one parent who is Maltese. Some feared that the church is losing its privileged position, and a few pointing to the presence of Islam on the island, blaming Islam as usual and Muslims for the loss of power, so to speak, of the church. While the majority of participants depicted homogenized Maltese in terms of religious beliefs, there were others who objected to this homogenizing discourse and called for a more just representation of Maltese society in terms of faith. For instance, there were teachers who complained that while their school there are shrines and a chapel, there is no space for Muslim students to pray. This was, of course, there were others who did not want that space and did not see that space as being an important space. Excuse me. The family also featured heavily in the participants' constructions. Many consider the family as the one in the middle top, as man, woman, and child. And they consider that construct of the family as being under threat due to the introduction of divorce, due to the possibility of reconstituting a family once you've divorced, and you can have another family with another person, and the possibility of same-sex couples to have children, to adopt basically children. In fact, an educator referred to the latter situation where same-sex couples adopt children as a pseudo-reality, as if we're only pretending that this same-sex family works. In fact, it was only a ruse to get more votes. A participant explained that the traditional family is the backbone of Maltese society, and he saw all other constructs as flawed, lacking in values, and as a result, children living in families tend to become antisocial. They will have problems at school and with their learning, and they will eventually end up as delinquents. And interestingly as well, this declining of the importance of the traditional family was seen as a direct result of the declining power of the church, because the church no longer controlled society as it did in the past. I mean, in the past, it used to tell people you cannot use contraceptives, you must have all those kids, etc., etc. And this lack of control from the church is seen as resulting in families, in parents separating and finding other partners. And now a good number of teachers pathologized non-traditional families, marking them at risk and stigmatizing both parents and children. So, another interesting issue which was elicited from the study: are Maltese people white? Does one have to be white to be Maltese? These were questions some participants posed or answered. Living on the fringe of Europe, being culturally Mediterranean and North African, composed a Maltese identity which is ambiguous. And participants expressed this ambiguity in their descriptions. Some claiming there is no such thing as a pure Maltese. others claiming that it is heartening to hear a Black person speak in Maltese, enjoying the possibility of a diverse Maltese population, as opposed to a homogeneous one. On the other hand, there were others who described Maltese as being essentially white, considering Black, Arab, and Muslim as, and here I quote, everything a typical Maltese is not. And finally, social class was another category featured in the educators' constructions of Maltese society. And here, educators positioned themselves onto constructs. On the one hand, you had a good number of educators who saw those living in poverty and those who had dead-end jobs, for instance, as being the sole, as if this was their fault, that they're living in poverty because they're lazy, they don't have a good job because they did not study, and considered it as something which they chose. On the other hand, there were those, which were much less, who considered people who were socioeconomically disadvantaged and people who had jobs where they didn't earn enough to have a good standard of living, as being victims of how our economy and society are structured. So we had these two opposing views. Interestingly enough, there was a person who considered those the rich at the top of the tiers as being at fault, as being glitches as well. And he said, and this person said, they piss, I may use that language because this is a direct quote, on the rest of us. However, the rest of us was the middle class, because he saw the middle class as being the victim of those at the top and those at the bottom. So, as can be seen on the overall differences, challenge educators' value system and worldviews. Social changes were making the different other more visible. For instance, the LGBTIQ community has become very visible these last years. And this shattered the myth of sameness in an essentialized Maltese identity. Thus, the educators' reactions were either of confusion, of fear, or of curiosity. It is significant that educators identified the other from within the Maltese themselves, the other from the other party, the socio-economically disadvantaged, those who are not Catholics, for instance. And these findings challenge the normative construction of the Maltese being homogeneous, as educators held a diverse range of understanding of what it means to be Maltese. Educators, with the exception of a few, were selective in who, in their view, deserved to belong to Maltese society, and did not seem to question the implications on the notion of justice their views had. Moreover, they took an assimilationist stance in most instances, further engaging in the oppression of the groups which they considered as different. So, as can clearly be seen, educators' constructions of Maltese society are diverse. And these constructions are not consensual, but are contested by the educators themselves. It is evident that educators are finding it difficult and stressful to engage with social diversity. And while outside school, educators can choose the people who they stay with, their friends, the groups they join, in schools, they do not have that, so to speak, luxury, because they have all the diverse students in their class. And therefore, For this reason, it is imperative that educators are first and foremost exposed to theories which would serve as the cornerstones of their practices, theories that make them more conscious of the political implications of their actions. Because teaching itself as a political act, whatever we say, whatever we do, leaves an impact on our students. Moreover, and not only. And moreover, considering the diversity within schools, educators must be conversant with intercultural competencies and pedagogy so that no student is left on the outside looking in. Thank you for listening. Your attention was appreciated.